It is recording. Right. So today is a special day that it is Beis Nissen.
Yeah.
And that is the yard site of the Rebbe Rashab. So I'm going to start with two little stories of the Rebbe Rashab, and then we'll go over to our Shir. And one is that in Lubavitch, this is the Friedrich Rebbe telling over, in Lubavitch, the Bedikas Chametz was done very, very carefully. The minig was an Erev Pesach morning. The Rebbe would go out into the open, to the yard, and he would shake out the pockets of his garments. Mendel, the Meshoris, the attendant, would stand there with a brush, and he would brush out the pockets which had been emptied. One time on Erev Pesach, the Rebbe Rashab asks Mendel Meshoris, "Did you clean out the chicken coop and the stable?" And he said, "Yes." And the Rebbe says to him, "You should know that you are responsible with it, with your neshama." So, very encouraging. Then we have another story. I'm reading from the Sefer Oitzim in Hogei Chabad. So it says here that one time, this is Rabbi Yankov Landau, he was like an elder bocher, and he was like the Rov in the house in Rostov. One time the Rebbe Stern Asara said to me that we have to check the room which we made as a Pesach room, as a Pesach kitchen. This was the eve of Rosh Chodesh of Nisan. This room had been already cleaned up and prepared for Pesach. And we'd put in that room, we'd put the wine and other things, other provisions for Pesach. The Rebbe had said, but we didn't wash the walls. So he wants us to take all the stuff out and clean the room again. After we clean the room the second time, the Rebbe says, this is Rosh Chodesh. The Rebbe says, we need to do B'dikas Chometz. I went into the Rebbe and asked, what's this idea of doing B'dikas Chometz on 2 weeks before Pesach? So the Rebbe said the following. Generally, when one prepares a room for Pesach a while in advance, generally people forget about doing a B'dika there when it comes to the right time. And if they do B'dika on the right time, with a little bit of delusion. It up. There's a kind of delusion that it's all okay, because by then already there's all the stuff is there already for the Pesach provisions, and therefore the bdika doesn't go very well. And he quotes the Rebbe's Lashon, "Dolik tzibele and dolik dich veisvos." Here there's the pile of onions, and here's the pile of whatever. And therefore, this is the Rebbe saying, back in Lubavitch, and when we were back home in Lubavitch, I was very often not home before Pesach, and I would send a letter to Nachman, who was in charge there at the house, that he should check the room as they were prepared for Pesach, like when a person's traveling to a distance, so then you check chometz before traveling. So Rabbi Landa says, I asked the Rebbe, the one who's traveling checks in advance because you can't check on the right day. But here we could check it on the right day and in the right evening. So the Rebbe says, again, he says, but if you're going to check on the right day, it's going to be a deluded b'dika because you're going to have the confidence it's all Pesach. And therefore, he wanted the room which was going to be used for Pesach exclusively. He wanted to have the b'dikas chametz there done right when it was kind of going to be designated for Pesach. Okay, so that's a vort of the Rebbe Rashab, two little stories, and I want to share with you some things. Let's take this. Okay. There we are. Right, what you have in front of you is a calendar. Doesn't look so clear to me. It's just the print is a bit small.
Everyone's primed for.
But what I want to bring out over here is that we are here together tonight just to kind of work through the schedule of the few days, the beginning of Pesach, because it is quite complicated. And so let's discuss that. I'm going to go first through a schedule, and then once I've gone through that, then I'll deal with about 19 questions, which arrived in advance of this year. So first of all, we'll start with Thursday. Every year, the day Erev Pesach is Tanas B'chayris. And so people who are B'chayrim, whether they're B'chayr from the father or from the mother, so they would have an obligation to fast. The general custom nowadays is that B'chayrim, instead of fasting, will attend a siyum. The fast is brought forward to the Thursday because it should have been on the 14th, which is this year's on Shabbes. So instead of bringing it forward to a Friday, it's brought forward to a Thursday. So anyone who is a B'chayr, who has a child who's a B'chayr, so on Thursday morning, there will be a siyum in Shul. After Shachris, in most shuls that will be the case. And so the B'chayrim who don't want to fast will make a point of being in Shul for the siyum. Thursday night, B'dikas Chometz follows the regular schedule. 10 pieces laid out in advance, sweep the rooms before the B'dika, and a candle, feather, wooden spoon, the works, just like every other year. It's an extra night earlier, but that's the latest it could be done. And once you've finished the B'dika, you do say Kol Chamira, as it is written in the Machzor, or in the Siddur, or in the Haggadah. So the B'dikas Chometz schedule is very much the same as every year. Now Friday. Friday, we burn the Chometz approximately the same time as every year, perhaps a little bit later, but not too late. We don't want to make it misleading for other years. So the Alter Rebbe says it should be before Chatzos. So we'll burn the Chometz around 12 o'clock. Once we've burnt the Chometz, we'll say the Yehi, which is printed there, but you won't say Kol Chamira. Because Kol Chamira said when burning the Chometz on regular year, by then you've stopped eating the Chometz, and by then you then declare all Chometz to be Hefker. Here, it would not be honest to do that on Friday, because you are still retaining Chometz for the Shabbos meals, for Friday night and early Shabbos morning. So, burning Chometz, yes, Yehi, yes, not to say Kol Chamira. Checking pockets, where people sometimes put food in their pockets, so pockets should be checked as one does every year at the time of burning Chometz. What's a bit challenging this year is about the sale of Chometz. Normally, my schedule, my personal schedule is, as soon as it's finished the time of eating Chometz, then I deal with the goy to sell the Chometz. It takes about half an hour. We go through the whole contract. We shake hands on the deal. The guy gives me money. We do kinyonim with a garment. I give the key to my house. And then once I'm finished reading and signing the document and the guy understands what's going on here, then I take those two big files of thousands of addresses and I give it to the guy and I say, now the chometz is all yours. And then I feel a big weight of responsibility off my shoulders, that now the chometz is totally sold and it now belongs to the guy. The challenge this year is that people, especially shops, may want to sell chometz later on. People might want their last bit of chometz, and so that's a bit of a challenge. Meanwhile, the shops which have been dealing with have both agreed that they will close by 1 o'clock. So after 1 o'clock, they will not be selling any chometz. Therefore, I can sell their chometz for them. And if any of you, or anyone else, buys chometz later on, this is, if you manage to buy chometz from the off license, I don't care where you get it from. and then you're going to put it in the cupboard. It's not sold. If the chametz is sold if the deal is done by 1 o'clock, let's say 1:30, whatever it may be, if you then at 4 o'clock buy some chametz and then you want to put it away in the cupboard, sorry, it's not sold. It's not included in the deal. So that's not a big worry. It's just something to be aware of. The chametz should be by midday on Friday. The chametz should largely be should be sold. Locked away, or sealed off. Now,
don't join business.
what you don't sell is the chametz which you are retaining for use on Shabbos. And the advice is given about using things like pita, which will be specially made hamotzi pita that doesn't cause crumbs, and you'll have those for lechem mishnah. They're not included in the sale. So if you have some left over on Shabbos morning, no point in putting them in the cupboard. It's still yours. And so you'd have to either finish them or you'd flush them down the toilet. Baruch Hashem, we have that facility in our houses nowadays that we can flush things away, and that would have to be done. So that and now if you are a diehard l'chaim drinker between the fish and the meat, well, or the fish and the chicken soup, so either you prepare an almost empty bottle, or you have a small bottle. That's what miniatures are created for. Or, well, if you have a big bottle, you won't be able to put the leftover back in the cupboard. So that would be a tragedy. You'd have to pour it down the toilet before 11 o'clock, kind of thing. So I want to emphasize that point. There's no later clicking in of the sale. The sale happens on Friday at about 1 o'clock. After that, the sale is final. If anyone will call me up later and say, I didn't sell my chametz this year, I will be able to tell them, well, go to find someone in a later time zone and let them sell the chametz for you. I won't be able to help them personally. Right, so that's the sale of chametz is happening on Friday, midday approximately, a little bit later. What you need to do on Erev Pesach, also now, like every other Erev, now Erev Shabbos is now doubling as Erev Pesach, sorry. Roast your zroya. You can't roast a zroya. If you forgot to roast your zroya before Shabbos, you won't be able to roast it at night on Motzei Shabbos, just before the Seder, because you're only allowed to cook stuff which you're going to eat. And since our minhag is not to eat the zroya, then you wouldn't be able to cook it or roast it. So make sure you roast your zroya on Friday or earlier. Grating mortar also, well, in any case, probably most of us want to use the machine. It's therefore so much easier to do it on Friday but it's going to be a question halacha if you didn't, whether you could allow, if you didn't prepare in advance, are you allowed to grate mortar on
should I miss?
So make sure you grate your mortar in advance, put it in a sealed container so it shouldn't lose its strength totally. Different to every Erev Pesach, where you're not allowed to have a haircut on Erev Pesach afternoon. This Erev Pesach, in other words, Friday afternoon, you could have a haircut, you could cut your nails. Especially if you've got some boys, they sometimes forget to have haircuts, and then you're going into the Sfiras Omer, and you're going to have and make sure that they have their haircuts before Yom Tov comes in. If you generally prepare candles, so now bear in mind you have to prepare candles for 3 days. Think about that. If you have an Erav with a neighbor, the custom is to renew the Erav every Erev Pesach. So if you do have an Erav with a neighbor, usually use matzahs and make sure you can you'll renew it Erev Shabbos. I'm going to look at the chat in a moment. One last thing which I have to do on Friday, if someone's got a bit of spare time, to check the matzahs, separate the whole matzahs from the broken matzahs, because you want on Motzei Shabbos, as late as it is, you want to be able to start the Seder with minimum delay If the matzahs are sorted, the whole ones from the broken ones are already sorted from before Shabbos, then you'll save yourself a good few minutes on just before the Seder. So someone's asking here, can you not put chametz in the cupboard on Shabbos at all? What you said about whiskey, if you find something that wasn't now, okay. What happens? I understand your question. If you find chametz on Pesach, what do you do if you find chametz during Pesach in your house? So I'll tell you a story. This is a good few years ago. A fellow called me up middle of Pesach. He has a son who would travel often to the former Soviet Union, and this fellow lives in northwest London and is sitting back on his couch, and he looks up on top of the dresser, whatever you call it, the china closet. There's this massive bottle of vodka, like a 1.5 feet high, and it's sitting on top of the cupboard. It was so large, it was put away up there, and they had forgotten to put it away. So what's the story about it? So the answer is, when you sell chametz, you've sold all the chametz in your premises. So that bottle of whiskey, or vodka, even though it wasn't put away, it was included. So if you do find a stray packet of biscuits or something on Pesach, then you just put it away in the cupboard with the chametz. But the pita and the bottle of whiskey, which you kept consciously for use on Friday night and Shabbos morning, so you didn't include it in the sale. That's why you were using it. So then the stuff which you consciously did not include in the sale, there's no point in putting in the cupboard then, because it wasn't included in the sale. I hope that's clear. Right. Someone's asking here, you cannot use a grater after Shabbos. So let's go through this practically. The kind of foods which we normally prepare in bulk, the kind of melacha which is normally done in bulk, may not be done on Yom Tov. So that's why we don't go picking apples off our apple trees on Yom Tov, because picking apples, harvesting, is a melacha usually done in bulk, and therefore you don't do it on Yom Tov. It's only the things like cooking, which you do for immediate use, for the same day kind of thing, that you do on Yom Tov. But the stuff which you do in for several days to apply, then you wouldn't be allowed to do on Yom Tov. So grating morer, we all buy our grain in jars nowadays, but if we make our own grain, we probably make a few days supply at once, and therefore it's very clear in Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to grate morer on Yom Tov. What about grating things like carrots, which will lose their crispness to a degree? So then, the Shulchan Aruch says you should grate them with a shinui in an unusual way. One suggestion would be, instead of grating into an empty bowl, to grate it onto the counter, of course a Pesach liquor counter, and then you put it into the bowl. So that's one way of doing a shinui. That's for things like carrots, which they may lose a bit of their strength, their crispness, their tastiness. So you are allowed to grate them with a shinui. Whereas things like morer are stricter, you shouldn't be grating them at all. Okay, the next thing we have here is, are you referring to an Erav within a building to carry in building between neighbors? You can either have an Erav in a building, or if you have two gardens adjacent to one another, and you want to be able to carry from one another. So either within a building to be able to carry within the building, or within the joint premises, or two neighbors next door to one another, as long as they can make an Erav if there's access to one another, but you need to have a loaf of bread, in this case matzah usually used, and that's done, and it's one of them makes a kinyan. We're not going to go into all the detail how to do it, but the minig is to renew it every year, so it shouldn't be kind of forgotten. Summary, we prepare on Friday like if the Seder would be Friday night, with the exception that you don't have to make salt water, because you can make salt water on Motzei Shabbos. Okay, we're going to get to the details of where to eat. I said I'm going to get to questions soon, so you know what? Let's finish off the schedule and then we'll come to the questions. All right. So now we're going to look at Shabbos morning. Friday night, Kiddush and Hamoitzi as usual, but not as usual. We're going to deal with eating at the table, eating outside. We'll come to that presently. Shabbos morning, we'll have to daven Shachris early in order to be able to have our Sudas Shabbos with a Lechem Mishneh, with Chometz early. And so approximately 7 o'clock, a little bit earlier, a little bit later, but approximately that time. We've got this terrible confusion this year with GMT and BST. But Shabbos morning, at any event, Shachris is early, 2-3 hours earlier than regular, and you come home and you have your Shabbos meal, Kiddush, Hamotzi, and a little bit more, and right. And then that should finish by 10 o'clock. Now, this next point might be a little bit of a difficult one. When we say finish by 10 o'clock, does that mean finish eating chometz, or does that mean finish the meal? And that's obviously a big difference. It could be a difference of 25 minutes and half an hour. Now, I'll explain to you something that we all know, that when you make hamotzi, you don't make a bracha on the potatoes, on the meat, on the soup. And the reason is because all the other foods are included in what we call lechem. They're all kind of subsidiary to the bread. But what would be if a person made a conscious decision, stop eating bread? So there is a discussion about this in the Gemara. So then the other foods will not be included in the hamotzi because you've already withdrawn from the hamotzi. And so this raises an issue. If by 10 o'clock you're not allowed to have any hamotzi further, well, then is the kugel or the meat included in the hamotzi, which the hamotzi in a sense has become obsolete. That's a bit of a problem. So I would encourage to try to finish the main courses by 10 o'clock. Dessert and a cup of tea afterwards is not a problem, because in any case, the dessert, you make a separate bracha. The cup of tea is covered by the Pri Hagofen, which you had at the beginning of the meal. But if you could try to finish the main meal, main course by 10 o'clock. If you don't manage to, there's plenty of poskim who are more lenient. So you have this whom to rely upon. I want to share with you, going back to this screen which I shared with you before. I want to scroll down here. Okay, here we are. This is a fascinating piece of manuscript of the Rebbe. This is going back to Tofshin Lamed Dalet, and that's 1974, which is the first time in my memory that Erev Pesach was on Shabbos. And at the time, the Rebbe had encouraged a leaflet to be published with guidelines how to observe this day. And so this was put together. It was put into the Rebbe to review before it would go to publication. So they write here, as you see in the fourth line, all meals for Shabbos as well should be prepared kosher for Pesach. So on this, the Rebbe comments. They've said that the meals should all be kosher for Pesach. They do point out that the challah obviously is not kosher for Pesach. That's true. The Rebbe comments that they should clarify that you're not allowed to eat matzah on Shabbos because it's Erev Pesach, like every Erev Pesach. But what I found fascinating is the comment which the Rebbe has parallel to the sixth line, v'kugel. That's the Rebbe's comment. He has v'kugel with a question mark. And I'm not totally sure what the Rebbe's kavona was. And how do I stop share? Sorry, bear with me a minute. Okay, never mind. Can you give me a second? Okay. All right. So I suspect that there are contemporaries for him who describe the people eating their Suda on on Shabbos Erev Pesach. They're huddling in a corner and they're sitting on the stairs, or they are outside somewhere, and it almost reminds us of the Suda HaMafsekes on Erev Tisha B'Av. And that's not really the way a Shabbos meal should be. A Shabbos meal should be like every other Shabbos, it's a pleasant time and relaxed time. So one should try to, and perhaps that's what the Rebbe was throwing in the kugel, that the Shabbos meal should be a Shabbos meal. And so someone asked whether it's okay to have the meal, to have just a hamotzi and just a little bit, and then take a break and come back a couple of hours later and have your Shabbos meal with potatoes and chicken and potatoes as like the menu for the rest of Pesach. And so I think that what the Rebbe is suggesting here is that this Shabbos meal should be a Shabbos meal as much as possible. Someone told me, now again, it's Rabbi Yosef Lander told me that the Rebbe Rashab said to his grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Lander, the Rebbe Rashab would say, Kashe kugul fleish, halach l'meshe Sinai. As if to say that to have those foods on the Shabbos menu had to be, not that the Rebbe Rashab was so interested in kugel, but it was like the standard Shabbos menu should be observed. Of course, kasha is a sticky food, so you wouldn't have kasha on Erev Pesach, Shechal b'Shabbos. But the kugel, if you can have a kugel at the Shabbos meal, that seems to be appropriate. Okay, so let's come back then. So Shabbos, we're going to have an early Shachris, an early meal. Stop your chametz eating by 10 o'clock. Now, I'm telling you, I want to emphasize this. Our calendar for London says 10 o'clock. That's not for Manchester. I don't know what time it is in Manchester exactly. And to also emphasize that other calendars will be about half an hour earlier or 20 minutes earlier. So, yes, there is that variation between the Alter Rebbe and others. If you want to stop earlier, gesundheit, but that's the Zman according to the Alter Rebbe. And then that's the Zman, the latest for eating chametz. Then there is a time which is called Zman Habir, by which one has to dispose of any chametz and no longer own any chametz. So before 11 o'clock, 11:03 actually, and if you have any crumbs, flush them away. Little crumbs on the floor, you don't have to start, with a magnifying glass looking for them. You can rely on kol chamira. Kol chamira is a declaration of bitul or hefker, and if you don't understand kol chamira in Aramaic, say it in a language which you understand. It's not a prayer; it's a declaration of intent, and so you should say it in a language which you understand. Where at this point, before 11 o'clock or before 11:03, you'll say all chametz in my possession, which is in my possession, whether I did see it, or I didn't see it, whether I know about, don't know about it, it's all going to be hefker. Then check if you should check your pocket, your Shabbos clothes, in case, although you check the other clothes before Shabbos, but maybe you put something in your Shabbos clothes, so check your pockets in case you have some hidden pita there. And then really now you can have a nice long rest. From then on you're very flexible. The only thing which we have here is the last quarter of the day from about 3 o'clock. You should avoid. There's a whole question of how much wine you can have, a bit more, a bit less. Is it going to affect your appetite? So the last quarter of the day, just keep off any wine, so it shouldn't affect your appetite. Okay, I've got it all on my list. I'm going to try to share something, but I want to first take away this other thing which I shared before. Okay, I'll try to share it. No. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. can I have any reaction whether you can see this sheet which I'm showing?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So we've gone through the schedule, and now we're going to go down through these questions. Thank you for that response. Well, before that, I'll deal with the chats, and I also would like to ask. I see that there's 100 participants. Baruch Hashem, that's beautiful. If some of you are using two devices in one house, if you would possibly be able to go to one device and two people look at it together, because other people are not able to join in if it's I imagine the capacity is 100 people. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go through the chat. Is it okay to wash and have Peter outside, then finish Suda inside as usual? We'll come to that in the questions. Would it be okay to take the chametz from locked up chametz cupboard before Shabbos morning? If it's not yours, you've already sold it, so you shouldn't be taking whatever you've sold is sold. Just you have to make up your mind what's sold and what isn't sold. Okay. So again, if all chametz is sold, come excess of chametz cupboard during Pesach to take out something not chametz. Yes, if you, let's say someone needs paracetamol and it's inside the chametz cupboard, you would be allowed to open it to take something and close it right away. If you got your, let's say, your electric meter or something is in the cellar and the chametz and the cellar sold in chametz, you want to go in there just for a minute to get something, that would be okay. But to use that premises freely, that's not okay. All right. Do you need to have fleischik at the Shabbos morning meal? Well, according to the quote from the Rebbe Rashab, one should try to have. If you can't, we can't see the shared screen. It isn't sharing. All right, so I'm going to have to deal with that in a moment. Are you allowed to have meat and Shabbos lunch? All right, here's stop share. Okay, we'll stop share, and then we'll go and share again. And that should now work. Is that any better? Those who'd had a problem with the viewing?
Yes, it's good.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to, I see there's a lot of questions on the chat, but meanwhile, it's getting more and more. Let's get through what we have in advance, because the thing is very simple. The things which come in advance, I thought about. The things which come in the chat, I didn't think about in advance, and so I'm much safer to deal with the stuff which I thought about in advance. Okay, let's go through. GMT changes to British summertime on the first day of Yom Tov at 2 a.m. May one adjust the time on a watch clock on Yom Tov? Now, actually, if you had one of those old-fashioned wind-up watches, possibly even, I'm not sure about the quartz one, just to turn the pointers, the hands on a clock from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, that would be allowed to be done on Yom Tov. The thing is not really relevant for a lot of our clocks, which are electronic, digital, etc. So it's not terribly relevant. What I would say is the advice to change your clocks, the ones which you can, to change them to British summertime on Friday. You do have, I have in my house a radio control clock, but then it should be clear that this is GMT, put up perhaps some kind of reminder, which clock is BST, which clock is GMT, because it's so important to keep track of the right time on Shabbos morning. And that's, if you change to BST, and which time are you following? So even if you do change to BST, make sure you have, if you have anything which is not so clear, make a note of something somewhere to be able to remember. Okay, should the food for Shabbos be served in Pesach dishes? It would be much more advisable nowadays. Baruch Hashem, we have disposables, and instead of first 1 minute you're eating chametz, and then the next minute you're going to be using Pesach cutlery and putting it in your mouth, I'd feel quite uncomfortable about that. And Baruch Hashem, we've got disposables, so use disposable for Shabbos meals when you're having your chametz. Once you're finished with your disposables, you'll take a look if there are any crumbs. If there are any crumbs, flush them. If you don't see any crumbs, then you can wrap them up and put them in the bin because there's no crumbs there. Again, if there are crumbs, then you have to dispose of them. And putting in the bin is not good enough. If there's no crumbs, so it's just you just put it in the bin outside, and that's fine. Obviously, if you have an Erav, to be able to put the stuff in the front and in the bin outside. Right now, someone asked me a couple of days ago, could they it's just a husband and wife living at home alone, and they're worried whether if they have two pitas for Shabbos morning, they may not be able to finish the second pita for lechem mishnah. So ask whether you could use a matzah as the second loaf, and that's actually Meforshim Poskim discussed that, and they have a bit of a problem because the lechem mishnah, both of them have to be edible, and here the matzah is not edible because we're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. And people asking, can you use a machine matzah on Erev Pesach? And I'd say absolutely not, because there are thousands of Yidden who use matzah, machine matzah, for the mitzvah. And so to use a machine matzah on Erev Pesach and say, oh, well, it's not real matzah, well, that would be a very wrong statement to make. Of course, we're machmir to use hand matzah, shmura matzah, but we shouldn't be dismissing the machine matzah as chametz chas v'shalom. Right, so one shouldn't be using it. There's another question: if you use a matzah, I mean, in addition for lechem mishnah, it's not edible. It could be muksa, because a food which you're not allowed to eat could possibly be considered muksa. Right. 4, after the chametz morning meal, may I place the remaining chametz in the cupboard where the sold chametz is kept? And I've emphasized that before already. No, you cannot put the leftovers in the sold chametz because the sale happened on Friday, and what you retained for Shabbos was not included in the sale. No point in putting it in the cupboard. If you do have a bit of pita left over, so either you bring some of the neighbors' kids to enjoy the last shred of chametz before Pesach, or you just crumble it and flush it down your toilet. Right, and the same is about the remains. Put in the outdoor bin. It's still in your premises, still in your reshus. Your bin is still your property, so that's not enough. If you live in an Eruv area and you rely on the Eruv, if you put it on the street, that would be okay because that's hefker. Anyone can go and pick up something from the street. But if it's in your bin, in your garden, that's still considered your private property, and that wouldn't be enough of a hefker. The latest time for chometz, that's point 6, latest time for eating chometz is Shabbos 10 a.m. So we already discussed this, whether you should stop the meal by then, or can you have non-chometz foods after 10 a.m. And I said better to finish the main courses by 10 a.m. and have after that you'll have just dessert and a cup of tea perhaps. But if you don't manage and you are still having other foods afterwards, then you would not make a separate bracha. Again, this is a point which we discussed before. Point 7, could we have a light meal before 10 a.m. and a full meal later on? You could do that. It would be perhaps to have the basic Shabbos foods at the earlier meal, just a little bit. I know it's early in the day, so you have a little bit less. And of course, later on, you can have a full meal, lunchtime, whatever, as I said before, the menu will be chicken and potato and chicken. Okay. And all right, all other vegetables which we do use on Pesach. All right, point 8 is an important question. Our minhag is on Pesach, we only eat fruit and vegetables which can be peeled. What about until when may we eat fruit and vegetables with their peels? So really, one could argue, and the halacha probably you would be allowed to have them a whole day. We're talking about chumras. I personally feel it's misguided because what's happening here is we've had all fruit and vegetables and chocolates and what have you a whole year round. We had 11 and a half months. We've had whatever food we want. Now we're going into a new stage of Pesach with all the chumras of Pesach, etc. And to start off with a compromise, well, now we can cut corners. It kind of sends a confusing message. Are we excited to go into Pesach mode, or are we going to cut corners as long as we can? Now, again, it depends if you can manage to be machmer. You should be machmer. One woman asks, "Do I have to be machmer until I plants?" So I said, "Stop just before." Okay. Point 9: May one serve meat, roasted meat, sorry, on Friday night and Shabbos day? The answer is yes. You are allowed to have roasted meat on Friday night and on Shabbos day. In the afternoon also. Just at the Seder, we don't have roasted meat because we don't want to give the misleading impression of having a Korban Pesach, which has to be roasted. And we, unfortunately, at this moment, don't have a Beis Hamikdash, so that's why we don't have roasted meat or chicken at the Seder night. Okay, here, let's go on. The minig, there's a halacha: you mustn't eat matzah on Erev Pesach. That's written in the Gemara. There is a din in Shulchan Aruch not to eat moror on Erev Pesach. Then the Chabad minig takes in a further chumrah that there's a mitzvah called charoises. So there's a mitzvah of matzah, there's a mitzvah of moror, and there's a mitzvah of charoises. So we don't eat the ingredients of the nuts and apples and pears, which are the ingredients of charoises. We don't eat any of those from Erev Pesach morning until after koirech at the second Seder. So you can serve a apple compote for the for dessert on the second Seder. So someone's asking, what about bits of nuts in a potato starch cake? I think that would be okay. We're talking here on a level of minhag, and just a little bit of nuts in a potato starch cake, I don't think is significant. Right, now we're coming to the very big question, which everyone's asking. May we make kiddush indoors, eat some chal in the garden, in a place where the dining room is visible, and then resume the main meal indoors? So that is acceptable, although it may not be as comfortable, and therefore you have to think about that. But if that's what you need, and that's going to give you peace of mind to do that, you'll have, I don't know why you have to make kiddush indoors and challah outdoors. You can make kiddush and have your challah outdoors. The same as you have the challah outside, you can have your kiddush outside. And of course, when you wash, be careful not to wash onto the water onto the grass. Yeah, but yes, you can do that. The point being here that when there is eye contact, there's a concept called shinui mokim. Moving from one place to the other kind of creates an interruption. But if there is eye contact to the place where you were originally, then that's not called a proper shinui mokim. It's not a departure from your original place. So if you do have a patio or something where you can see the room where you are having the rest of the meal, then you could have your challah outside and then continue your meal, your main meal, in the dining room, and you can see from one place to the other. But then what would be advised at before benching, if you're still before 10 o'clock, to have another kazayas towards the end of the meal, if that's possible. If you don't, that's it. Then it doesn't. Right. Now, a point which I would like to make is lighting Shabbos candles. Normally, we light Shabbos candles at the table, and what would be advisable is for if you are having chametz at the table, so you'll have a plastic tablecloth. Once you finish your chametz meal, so then you'll take away that tablecloth and make sure there's no crumbs. If there are, you'll flush them down the toilet, and then you'll take away that tablecloth and you put it into the bin. So if you are doing that, you won't want to have your disposable tablecloth under your candlesticks. You'll have that under a separate piece, so you should be able to remove the tablecloth without having to worry about lifting the candlesticks, because candlesticks are obviously muksa on Shabbos. Normally, we try to light the candles at the table. At least, if they're not at the table, they should be at a place where they are shedding light and enhancing the Shabbos meal. So if you have a sideboard, that's also okay. This person says that it looks like she lights a lot of candles. She wants to light some at the table and some on the sideboard. Now on Pesach, she wants to use disposable tablecloth, as we just discussed. Can she put all the candles on the sideboard? So if that's what you have to do, that would be okay, but it's nicer to have some candles at the table mamish, and just you work out with your tablecloth that you have your tablecloth reaching until where your candlesticks are, or you can have another solution which I've seen in one house where they cut a big hole where for the candlesticks, and then they are able to lift. Well, I don't know whether that would work for Pesach actually. All right, so that's another possibility of having the disposable tablecloth not under the candles, and then you can dispose of it and still have your candles at the table. Right. Once we're done with the chametz, I will want to remove the plastic tablecloth. What should I do with the candlesticks at the table? As I said, generally we should consider the candlesticks as muksa as they are every Shabbos. And this business of putting a candy or a little minchamayriv on the tray, and therefore the whole thing is demuxified, is not a straightforward solution. So therefore, I wouldn't encourage it. If you have a goysha, help, then they could take it off the table. But I'll say it's not recommended. Okay. If you make an Erev with your neighbors, so it should be, if you're making the Erev, it should be Shmura Matzah. Should women and children also say Kol Chamira? Well, I think yes, because Kol Chamira is said for even children today. Often they will get pocket money or they do a bit of babysitting. I'm talking about in the teens, and they will possibly have their own chametz, and you can't be mafkeh their chametz. So they should be saying. So when you say kol chamira on Shabbos before 11 o'clock, have everyone also say kol chamira. And I said if they don't understand the Aramaic, say it in Hebrew. Flossing, brushing, and teeth on the Shabbos once again after 10 o'clock before 11:03, brushing it. Now, when was last this kvias, this calendar? So Rav Padva was eingesund, Rav Padva the Rav here, he allowed the using of toothbrush to dispose of chametz. I would say certainly you can when you floss, if you don't normally bleed, then you would be allowed to floss also on Shabbos. It's not a problem, and but again, the remainder of that floss will have to be thrown out. So I guess either use those little what they call forks, those dental things, or you'll cut off a piece before, because cutting off on Shabbos is a little bit questionable. Right. Someone asked today. I got a question. May you leave in the fridge your mayonnaise and lemon juice used in chametz? Now, if you actually put in chametz into the mayonnaise, which I wouldn't be so happy about leaving it in, but if you do, yeah, the lemon juice didn't become chametz in the first place. But if you did have, let's say you put in a chametz knife or chametz fork into the mayonnaise and you don't want to throw it out, it's not real chametz, yeah? What I would say is wrap it in a bag and and tape it over, and then you just leave it in the fridge. That would be okay. Then people are asking about wine. Wine is not chametz, so people, especially if you have shukes bracha, but generally wine does not need to be sold in the chametz. The fact that the bottle has been used during the year and therefore you don't want to leave it out, I fully sympathize, and I do the same thing. But I don't have to sell the wine. You could just put it in the chametz cupboard just as a precaution, but it's not actually sold. And even if it were sold, it doesn't make it also, because the guy never touched it and it's totally in your possession. One last point on my list, and then I'll go to the chats and see we have quite a few points there. A reminder to toivel utensils that weren't toivelled last year. Last year, a lot of people were very concerned because of COVID, and they bought new kalim and didn't manage to toivel them, and there were various methods, etc. With the federation had some kind of system of selling it to a goy, etc. Those are all temporary measures, and now that Baruch Hashem things are more stable, and one can take them to a mikveh. So any kalim which you didn't over last year, you should remember to take them to a mikveh. All right, so I've finished my list of questions, and I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to go to to your questions, which you have sent in. Let me just now, where's that again? Where's that share? Screen sharing, that's good. Now, where's that? Okay. I'm going to go. Are you allowed to have meat at Shabbos lunch? And the answer is yes. You can have meat at Shabbos lunch in the morning, later on in the day, there's no problem. Okay, so now you're asking, can we eat foods on this Shabbos which are kosher Pesach, but we like manufactured foods? So I think I've addressed that. If you need to do that because that's the only way you can manage with the family, Knen Hora, Ken Yirbu, so do that. But I would really discourage it because, as I said, chinuch-wise, you're going into the beautiful atmosphere of Pesach with its, its pristine kind of atmosphere, and to go in with pshoris is a little bit, I think, confusing. Okay, asking where to eat challah at table. If you feel that you are able to eat the challah at the table and with a disposable cloth, that would be more straightforward. But if you are concerned, especially with children, and therefore you want to eat the challah away from the table, in the garden, etc., so long as you can see from one to the other, that would be okay. All right, so totally unrelated question. Until what time do we have to say the Nasi if you've got to say it during the day? Interesting question. Generally, I would say you can say it after chatzos. Normally, one doesn't do mikra balayla. So if you didn't manage to do the nasi after 12 o'clock, you can say the nasi. Is it, in general, is it okay to use extra soft toothbrush over Yom Tov? Generally, I must tell you, I think you know this as well as I do, that on Shabbos we don't normally brush our teeth on Shabbos. I actually was surprised that Rav Parve he gave that heter, because generally, and there's a sikha of the Rebbe in Shabbos Pashas Mishpatim Tovshin Chof Hei, and he made a comment that when we don't brush our teeth we brush every day. He says, the idea of mentioning Hayom Yom about rinsing your mouth before davening, as part of your preparations for the day. So as part of this, the Rebbe says about brushing teeth also, but not on Shabbos. So I wouldn't encourage it unless someone has a special need. Okay. I'm going to go down further. Can an elderly person who has moved out of a house for Pesach go back during Chol Hamoed to shower because she's unable to bathe where she's staying? A very good question. What I would say is that when this person sells the chometz, they should stipulate that they are retaining permission to go back to use the bathroom at home, and of course any chometz. There should not be any chometz left out in the corridor nor in the bathroom. Then it's just she hasn't sold the whole house. Right. What is the position of communal bins in flats? Okay, so that is not called total hefker, because a communal bin is still limited. Not everyone's allowed to go there, and therefore on Shabbos, again, you've got your leftover pita. To put it in a communal bin in a block of flats is not adequate, because it still has got a degree of private ownership. That wouldn't be adequate. Question: if having a fuller meal later in the day on Shabbos, do we need to make kiddush? And the answer is no. Once you've had your kiddush in the morning, like we don't make kiddush at Suda Shlishis, at Shalosh Shudas in Yiddish, so we don't need to have. If you have a fuller meal later on in the day, you don't need to do kiddush again. Simply to provide a variety of something different. You're saying that the reason why you want to give them manufactured foods is all right. I mean, Baruch Hashem, comparison to 40 years ago, which I can't speak about the 60 years ago because I don't remember. Yeah, but we've got so many more foods available today than we had 40 years ago. Avocados, I never saw avocado till I was about 14 or younger, about 10. I'd never seen avocado before. There are muli. There's it's not for me to start telling you which vegetables are available. Speak to other ladies, and Baruch Hashem, you can make, let's say, with muli, you can make like a coleslaw. You can make lots of different things. Baruch Hashem, even within with all the chumras, there's still one can make a lot of nice foods. Right. Does not eating more include eating lettuce? Absolutely, yes. So no lettuce on Erev Pesach. Does not eating the matzah, more and charos and Erev Pesach start by the night or the day? It starts from the morning. Okay. Very good point about the toothbrush. Your toothbrush, which you used for getting your last bit of crumbs between your teeth after your lechem mishneh, that's a chometz toothbrush. And what I would say is you rinse it off in the bathroom sink, not in the kitchen sink, and certainly not in the Pesach kitchen sink. And then once you're done, you chuck it. Right. Mayonnaise has grain vinegar. That's a very interesting point. I didn't realize that. So back to the one who asked. So if your mayonnaise, the one who asked about the mayonnaise before, check. If it's got a kosher Pesach hechsher, then you're okay to just wrap it up and put it in the. If it doesn't have a kosher Pesach hechsher, then I'm afraid you shouldn't be keeping it in your fridge. Am I allowed to kasher my braces on Shabbes? No, you shouldn't be kashering on Shabbes. You should have to kasher them before. And so obviously you're talking about braces which are removable. What I would say is you just for the if you kasher them on Friday, fine, and just you'll manage Friday night and Shabbos morning without the braces, and then you'll go on to use them for Pesach. All right, someone is adding here, sangria wine is not kosher Pesach. At least it wasn't in the past. I'm not sure. Is sangria wine a kind of vinegar? I'm not familiar. All right. What are your views on kashering your cooker for Pesach instead of having a Pesach Dika one? Okay. We try to, in Chabad particularly, we're not so into kashering stuff for Pesach. We try to get stuff especially for Pesach. If a person is limited with their resources and space, etc., whatever your limitations are, you can kasher. Someone asked me today and about they moved into a new house and there's a stove there. So one way to kasher would be you'd clean the stove very well. Then you'd take the blech and put it on top of the stove, turn the fires on full for about 15 minutes, let's say. That would burn any residue of the on the grids, but then what the person asked, which I was very pleased about, then to take something like she said about barbecue grade or something, let's say chicken wire, something which then raises a slight gap, so your Pesach Tikka pots are not sitting directly on the burnt out, although they're burnt out, but they were the chometz Tikka surface. That's just as a chumrah. Right. Is eating vegetables on matzah considered gibrox? The answer is no. It's not. Putting vegetables like avocado on matzah is not gibrox. Like banana, let's say. Personally, I was brought up not to do that, so I don't do this. But certainly, if you've got children who are chalashing for something different, something easier, it's something which you could give in onto, or with that they can have avocado on matzah, or potato or banana or matzah, that should be okay. I would advise you though to use only disposable utensils, disposable cutlery, because you don't want to have a regular metal knife with the avocado, with the matzah crumbs, and then washing up with the gibrox. Baruch Hashem, we've got that facility, so use disposables for doing that. Could you use manufactured things for the Friday night? And before 11, definitely. You're eating chometz mamash. You can use manufactured stuff also. Right. According to Chabad Minig, is ginger okay? So in the Rebbe's Haggadah, he mentions there that talking about the charoises, the Arizal is quoted as saying charoises even, charoises eitz. Even stands for apple, baron, and nis, apples, pears, and nuts, and eitz stands for ingwer and cinnamon, which is ginger and cinnamon. And he says, B'shonim achronos, we don't use ginger and cinnamon. So from there, I know that Chabad minhag is not to use ginger, although I don't know what type of ginger they had in Russia. So whether it's very different to what we have today, I don't know what to answer to that. It seems to be a bit strange. It's a root vegetable and it can be peeled, but I just see there that the Rebbe's Haggadah has that the minhag not to use it. Can we eat only cooked chicken or meat on the Seder night? Yes, it can be. It doesn't have to be chicken. It can be meat also. What do you do if you have a fixed brace? Don't use a blowtorch. What you do, you clean out as well as you can. Try to avoid having hot chametz for 24 hours before Pesach. Hot chametz means something like pizza just out of the oven kind of thing, or hot knedelach. But that's the most much you can do. You know what? I've got also a problem. I don't have braces and stuff, but I have fillings. And they're also made of metal, and they also absorb. And what's going to be done? That's what we're living with. Rebbe Rashab didn't want to have any fillings, but most of us do have, and just live with that. Yes. Someone's asking here regarding only using white plates. Can we also use clear plates also, or white with silver rim around the edge? Clear plates I don't have any problem with. The white with silver rim, I don't know what the silver is. I think the silver is a paint. If it's a real silver, it's a different story. We have silver dishes on, we have silver bechers. If it's a paint, I would say keep off it. Right. Someone's asking a question. Someone will be sleeping at our house. We are not there. Is it enough for us to sell the house and they use just what they need? Okay, let's think about that carefully. You're not home and you've got chametz. So you sell the chametz in your premises. That's what you should do. Now, they are using the premises. They have a chiyuv to do b'dikas chametz there. If they're using the premises, they have to do b'dikas chametz. So you should be telling them that all the chametz cupboards, they should be like sealing off, like with the masking tape, as you would normally do yourself. So that's what they should be doing, and they should be doing. So you'll sell your chametz at that premises, but they, as the users, as the residents, they'll have to do their own b'dikas chametz before at the right time before Pesach. Can I feed my young young children kitnias or gibrox? Okay, certainly one should avoid that. Unless you're really the earlier years that Rebbe was a little bit more lenient about gibrox for children. Later years he encouraged not to give them. Kitnius is even more of an issue in a sense because it's a takonas chachmei Ashkenaz. One shouldn't be doing that unless it's an really exceptional circumstance. As I said before, largely we've got a large variety of foods which we can do with ala hidurim. So one shouldn't be making. So now you're asking, someone's asked, chuck the toothbrush where though? Into the dustbin. But you've already like the cutlery. You first check that there's no crumbs. Now with the toothbrush, I said before, you'll wash it under the tap in the bathroom sink. So then there's not going to be any crumbs left. But still, it's used as chametz, so chuck it into the bin. Okay. So you're telling me that Joyvan makes sangria, which isn't kosher lePesach. This is all right. It wasn't any of the questions before, but if anyone has, this is a public announcement. There's a wine called sangria, which is not kosher lePesach. So if you have it, you put it in the salt chametz. Okay. It's written. Someone's asking. It's written on the braces that one is not allowed to put in boiling water on them. Does it mean that the child should not wear braces for the whole of Pesach? Okay. Braces, and once you get a little bit older than me, you start. Some people wear dentures, and they also mustn't be put in boiling water. So the advice for people who have dentures, etc., and who do want to kasher them, would be to first clean them well, use a detergent of some sort to kill any to destroy any residue of food. Take pour from the kettle into a glass, put the denture or braces into it just for a couple of seconds, just for a second. In, out, under cold water, and you should be okay. You leave it a bit longer, it's going to start melting. That's the problem. They are quite delicate that way. But if it's in and out, Mrs. Davidoff, could you add anything to that? Okay.
I don't know. I really don't know. I would have to ask my husband.
All right. Okay. If you get any clarity, but I don't have public liability insurance. So if someone comes to say that they ruined their dentures because I told them to put it in a glass of hot water, so that's why I'd like to be covered. But as far as I understand, just a quick dip for just for a second, and then right away putting in cold water, it should be safe.
I'm sorry. I know for sure that they cannot be put. I asked that question. So they look very delicate. They're like totally plastic and expensive. So that was my question. Just not to put them for a week.
Okay. No. You just clean them well.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Okay. Let's move on. Confused about brushing teeth on Shabbos. If can't, then after 10, we should or shouldn't. What I said is if you are brushing teeth after 10 o'clock, once you finish eating chametz, and then if you can brush your teeth with a light, but if you don't normally bleed, you can brush your teeth with a lightly to hopefully get rid of the chametz. Okay. Okay. Going on to another question here, was direct to me. In regard to bins, if the city neglects to collect them, what should we do about the chametz in the bins? Our bin collection has recently been changed to Fridays. There are clearly some issues with the management, and they have neglected to collect some type of bins each week ever since the change. Well, yes, I'm sorry about that. The stuff which is in your bins in the front of your house is still your property, and what you're going to have to do is either included in the mechiras chametz. That's one way of doing it. Not so keen about that. Once you've had your last collection, so from then on, perhaps be more careful whether you put out chametz in your bins, and there might be somewhere where you can take your leftovers and put it in a bin on the street, let's say, like mamash on the street. If it's on the plastic bags, it might be manageable. Okay. Someone writes here, I usually light with some oil and the rest with candles. For Pesach, can I use only candles? I light a lot, Baruch Hashem. That's wonderful. Right. Why don't you want to use the oil for Pesach? Is that because of kashrus? There's no reason to, if you use oil just for burning, not for food, that shouldn't be a problem. There is, if someone, let's rephrase the question. If you've had a minute to light with oil and you want to start using candles, oil is a bit more mehuder, although with Chabad we don't light with oil, but if you've started doing that, to stop doing that would be a question of Hatorash Nezorim. But if you have some problem just for Pesach, and then after Pesach you revert, so then you would be allowed to do that. Soup with barley in it. So barley is chametz. So you could, well, I don't know why you dafka want to do that, but if you had soup with barley, you'd finish the soup, finish the barley, and then your empty bowls you'd be able to put in the bin. Next question here from Oxford. I want to make a lot of zero as at once I can do them in the oven. I'm not sure what that means. A frying pan. We always cook them on an open fire. I didn't understand this question. Perhaps you'll rewrite it.
It's probably zero, not zero, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. If I want to make a lot of zeroya. Thank you. Good. as a lot of zroyas at once. Can I do them in the oven, in a frying pan? We always cook them on an open fire, but it's difficult with many. Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
A
how about
disposable
using a grill?
barbecue. Use a disposable barbecue.
Why don't you do disposable? You can, if you have a Pesach Dika grill, you can grill them. That's also a form of roasting. That would be okay. If it's roasted in an oven, in a fry, sorry, in an oven, I think that's okay. That's called roasting. That's okay. In a frying pan, could you do it without any added liquid? The roasting would mean without any added liquid. Right. Let's go on. Thank you for that help with deciphering that message. Could it be that we can't use ginger in the charoises and okay for? That's not the way I understood the comment there. I understood that we don't use ginger and cinnamon, and that's why we don't put it in the charoises. Right? Can we have almonds on Pesach? Yes. If you go to the Chabad minhag of peeling everything, you buy almonds in the shells, and you crack them, and that's part of the joys of Pesach. Sitting around with the children and knacking nuts and being very creative that way, and solving the world's problems at the same time. Okay, is cabbage okay? And no.
Dan Raskin,
Yeah.
might I ask the question about the almonds? It's because whenever I've seen them, you can either buy them fresh, in which case you can't really eat them because they're wet, or you buy them dried, but I think they've been dried in an oven.
You can buy them in the shells.
But aren't they? Haven't they been dried in an oven in the shell?
No. Not as far as I know.
Oh, thank you. That's very good news.
We always used to use almonds as at home. That doesn't a problem. Okay. To buy the almonds in packs, which are already shelled, then that goes to manufacture stuff and peeling and all that. But if you buy it in the shells, not a problem. Is cabbage okay? We don't use cabbage because we can't peel them, even though it's quite packed. As it starts off in life, they are quite a bit open. So no. About the silver on plates. So there's a Chabad, not only Chabad, there's a Chassidish minhag of not having colored dishes, not having, because of the concern of how kosher the Pesach the coloring is. So someone asked, what about a silver rim on dishes? So what I was saying is a silver rim on, let's say now you've got these disposable stuff. That's what I was thinking the question was, and it's just paint. It's not silver. It's not metal. That's why I was a little bit concerned. You're saying, coming back to the question about you're away and someone's using your house, and they will only sleep there. It doesn't matter. If you're using a premises on Pesach, even just for sleeping, you do have to do bdikas chametz there. I think I mentioned previously, even if you hire a car on Pesach, middle of Pesach, you want to use that chamber, you'd have to do bdikas chametz. Not with a candle, but you'd have to look around and make sure there's no chametz lying around. Right. Okay. Right. Thank you. You've clarified about the braces. It says not even for a second. Okay, we've gone through that already. Right. Here we come. The famous question about garlic and Pesach. If you've had, that is not a Chabad, it's not an indigenous Chabad minhag to avoid garlic, but there are many Chabad families who don't use garlic on Pesach. If you wanted to switch, till now you'd be not using, now you want to switch, you'd have to do Hatoras Nedarim. If you've never done, never consciously avoided garlic on Pesach and you wanted to use it and peel it, that would be okay. Can you sell your rubbish in the bins in Mechiras Chometz? If you're desperate, I think that would be okay. Right. Back to the barley in the soup. That was, okay, thank you. What was the question about the barley in the soup? That it was an example of hot chametz to refrain from eating 24 hours with those braces. Thank you, yes. So when we said not to have hot chametz for 24 hours before Pesach, so you gave an example of barley soup. Thank you. Or lokshen soup for the same thing. Yeah, thank you. Clarified about the zroyas. Let's go on. Can you flush leftover crumbs down the sink instead of toilet if you have a separate Pesach sink enclosed of your Chametz kitchen? Yes, there's no difference. I mean, obviously the toilet is usually more convenient, but you could flush them down the sink, kitchen sink. Small, very small crumbs. Don't try to, don't risk getting a blocked sink on Pesach. It's not fun. Okay. Can we buy shelled almonds before Pesach and use to make a cake? I get challenged by these questions because the chumras, when it comes to halacha, it's also not straightforward, but it's more straightforward. When it comes to chumras, how far do you have to go? I can see a reason to be a bit more lenient before Pesach to use shelled almonds to making a cake, but it depends how far you want to go. I mean, I was actually discussed with the class today in the girls' school, year 12. We're talking about this, and they asked about peels. Now, I told them that, do you have to peel foods which you're going to use, which you're going to cook before Pesach? So I told them actually the wine which I use on Pesach is made from unpeeled grapes. But in the wine, there's no it's totally, there's no residue of the peel, so to speak, if I'm using the right word. But let's say if I'd make an ice cream before Pesach, and I cut up strawberries. In the middle of Pesach, I'm now having ice cream, and there's the same peel of the strawberry. So the fact that it's coming to the ice cream before Pesach, how does that help? So if that's just my heritage about it. If the peels are going to be visible as they were from as peels of fruit, then I wouldn't use that even from before Pesach. If it's totally, perhaps in the case which you're saying about a cake, there's no residue and no noticeable, one could be more easygoing about it. Right. Can you explain the concept of using some foods, e.g. sugar, before Pesach to bake cakes and not on Pesach itself? Okay, very good question. There is a concept, as you know, of bittul b'shishim. Bittul b'shishim does not work on Pesach. And therefore, let's say something you mentioned about ice cream. You can't make ice cream, I understand, from boiled sugar. So you want to make an ice cream before. So if you have a powder called granulated sugar, and there's a speck of something else there, so it's not bottled. So to use that on Pesach, you don't have the facility of bittul b'shishim. If you blend it into a food before Pesach, then you do have achieve bittul b'shishim. Therefore, if you wanted to use sugar before Pesach for baking cakes or ice cream, that would be okay. You can use granulated sugar. It should be with hechsher. It's not unheard of that the manufacturers packing sugar may also have in the same plant, they may have other chametz products, and that's why even if you boiled sugar, or certainly if you're making with granulated sugar before Pesach, you should make sure you have a kosher Pesach sugar. Right, let's move on. Can one eat lettuce on Pesach besides the Seder night? So this is what people do is they buy for the Seder and they use the leftover for the during the rest of Pesach. And some people don't use the leftovers, but that's up to you. But otherwise, we can't peel lettuce. So I've said this many times. The chumras for Pesach is not a perfect science. That which we need to use, so we use, and so we use it for Pesach night for the Seder. And if you have leftover, you don't want to waste it, I understand, but to start buying lettuce freely over Pesach doesn't fit with the minhag of peeling everything. Someone's telling me that the Purple Pesach cookbook has lots of cabbage recipes. Well, obviously, some people are more lenient about cabbage, and apparently there's other foods which a lot of Chabad families don't use. So listen, things evolve in different communities. What's essential in one place becomes in other places is not an essential. Fine. Right, let's move on. Is there a way to make apple juice where you blend unpeeled cored apples with water and strain? The peel doesn't pass through. That's fine. If you do that before Pesach to make your own apple juice. Like you make wine with unpeeled grapes, you can make apple juice with unpeeled apples. That would be okay. Fine. What about mushrooms? Okay, so I've spoke about this on Motzei Shabbos, and I'd read in some guides about not using mushrooms on Pesach because they are grown on a bed of malt, beds of grain. I've since seen in the Kadasya HaKohol their Madrich HaKashrus, you can see it here. And they have a paragraph here about mushrooms, and they are saying it's not really a problem during it's only if it would grow on Pesach, but if it grew before Pesach, they say it's not a problem. I saw this morning Rav Vosner in Shevet HaLevi talks about this. He says, okay, it may be a zehirus bialma, it may be an extra chumrah to avoid mushrooms. So kind of about peeling mushrooms, buying mushrooms and peeling them. I mean, I don't think we ever did it at home, but if someone does want to, they could rely on that. But there is room to be a bit more machmir because, as we know, that they are cultivated on a bed of grain, which is probably chametz. So it's on the level of chumrah rather than a strict halacha. Okay, I think we've finished our list of questions, and so I think I'm going to wish you all a good night, and always, you know my email address. If you don't, I'm going to tell you my email address, and that is, and if you want to have my that Pesach calendar, which I showed you before at the beginning of the year, I'm happy to send you a copy of it. So my email address is Dayan, that's spelled Dayan, Dayan at Lubavitch UK, no dot between the Lubavitch UK. So Dayan at LubavitchUK.com. I wish you all a kosher, Freilich and Pesach, and a Freilich and Tomid, and we should have a Geula, a Mitzvah Shtema, we should celebrate Pesach with Moshiach Tzidkenu, Beis Hamikdash HaShlishi, Karav Mamash.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.